Hey everyone, Mr. Kimsing here, and here with my 2020 predictions for the Extension 2 Maths exam that I didn't get to do on my live stream yesterday. So I've just got this table up, and this is from the sample paper of the various uh, weight distributions from the different topics. And you can see the idea is, well, actually, first of all, before I get into that, you may be wondering, hey, why is it more than 100% in terms of the mark allocation? And that's because some of the topics will be present in multiple kind of questions. So one question may have the crossover between different topics, and that's why the count is a bit higher than 100 marks. So that's just explaining that. But I guess the idea is with your time that you have left, you want to be thinking, how can I maximize my mark? What topic should I be focusing on? And so just looking at it briefly, you want to be looking at the topics that are weighted the highest. Just ignoring the last one because that's usually like a communication dot point, which encompasses all kind of problem solving. So I want to ignore that one for now. It looks like MEX 12-5, that's at 25%. MEX 12-4 at 21%. MEX 12-6, that's at 19%. So you can see these are weighted pretty heavily compared to the other topics that are present. So let's just have a quick look at what topics those actually are. MEX 12-1, that looks like a generic sort of problem solving dot point, so we'll just ignore that. MEX 12-2, choosing appropriate strategies to construct arguments and proofs in both practical abstract contexts. So that's proofs. MEX 12-3, that's our vectors topic, that's new, that's vectors. MEX 12-4, this is our first highlighted one, that's complex numbers. So that's MEX 12-4, complex numbers. MEX 12-5, applying integration skills. So MEX 12-5 is integration. And last but certainly not least, MEX 12-6 is using mechanics. So pop that over here. And just to confirm, MEX 12-7 is, yep, just applying problem solving to various problems. Cool. So here's our breakdown. We have our most highly weighted topics being complex numbers, integration, and mechanics. So if you're thinking about what should I be studying, these are probably the main ones you want to be focusing on due to the weighting there. Obviously, if you're aiming for your E4s, then you've got to be studying everything. But that's just what's going to be the majority of the exam that's there, right? Other things to be thinking about is what is going to be new content this year, because typically if something's new content, they'll want to touch on that in some regard, right? So vectors, that is new content, and you'll need to know the 2D and sort of 3D applications that we're looking at now. Also in complex numbers, there were some formally introduced Euler forms that they can now do different types of problems with. And with the proofs, some of the notation is new. So the formal proof notation that you would use and knowing how to decipher some of those will be present, I think. So those are the main new things. But again, I think it really remains key that integration is going to be the skill that you want to be focusing on the most, because integration, not only is it the most weighted topic, but it actually plays into the other topics as well. For example, in complex numbers, they can ask integration problems. In mechanics questions, they can ask, integration is just a key skill that you'll need there. In terms of the specific content itself, just a few things I want to make note of. If I bring up the sample paper over here, question 16C part 1 from the sample paper actually uses the sum of a geometric series, which is from the advanced course. And this brings something to light, that the advanced course is actually assumed knowledge for the Extension 2 course. So even though you're not sitting the exam, they assume that you can do anything from that course. Which means that although you may not necessarily be practicing the advanced problems, it's good to have an overview of the content that's there. So for example, sequences and series doesn't necessarily present itself in Extension 1 or Extension 2 as obviously, and so that's why it's really important to be aware of that. Same thing with the new advanced content, like probability distributions. Wouldn't surprise me if they sort of snuck their way in with something like that, in terms of just the referencing that particular topic and the skills involved with that, which is essentially integration. So again, integration is key here. I did want to also touch on the vectors questions, since that is new content, and the extent to which vectors will be asked is something that remains a big question mark. So if I go to question 15, for example, you can see that although 15C part 1 starts off as a nice calculation proof kind of question from part 2 and part 3, that really requires a pretty good understanding of what's going on. So I think that's something to be aware of when we're looking at extension 1 and extension 2 vectors. Extension 1 vectors, I think they'll ask a bit more pedestrian kind of questions, like finding projections or finding angles between vectors. But it looks like in extension 2, from the sample paper at least, they're really ramping it up in terms of the difficulty. And I guess that makes sense because you are doing extension 2. It's like the hardest course in New South Wales, so for high school level. So that's something to be aware of. The questions that they can ask from extension 2 vectors could expand into this territory of really having a good understanding of the topic there. Okay, so those are my predictions for the extension 2 exam that's happening tomorrow on Monday, with these kind of weightings here and the content that we've just talked about. All the best.